My daughter thought I didn't notice her slipping that strange substance into my soup. She smiled, told me to eat up, like everything was normal. So I quietly switched the plates, and what happened next changed everything. Before I go on, I just want to thank you for being here with me. If you'd like to hear more stories told from an old heart that's lived through a few storms, feel free to subscribe, and let me know where you're listening from. Your support means more to me than you might ever realize. I used to think the quiet moments of life were the safest ones, mornings especially. Those slow, gentle hours when an old man can sit with his thoughts without feeling rushed or judged. Most mornings, I wake before the sun comes up, not because I have anywhere to be, but because people my age don't sleep the way they used to. The house always greets me the same way: soft floorboards, the muted hum of the fridge, the faint ache in my back reminding me I'm not 30 anymore. It's a familiar rhythm, a comforting one. I shuffle into the kitchen, steadying myself along the counter with 2 fingers, and set the kettle on. That kettle has been with me longer than most people in my life. It shivers just before boiling, like it's clearing its throat, and every time I hear it, I think of my late wife, Helen. She used to say the day didn't begin until that kettle sighed. Some mornings, I still catch myself waiting for her to walk in and tease me for using too much sugar in my tea. Grief never disappears. It just learns to sit quietly beside you. After my tea, I sit in my oak chair, the same one I've had for decades, and watch the sunlight crawl across the tiles. It's a small ritual. But when life slows down, the small rituals begin to feel like anchors, keeping you steady in a world that doesn't stop moving. My daughter, Marissa, used to understand that. She used to sit across from me with her cereal bowl, swinging her little legs and telling me about her day before it even started. Every story began with, "Daddy, guess what?" But children grow up, and somewhere along the way, the stories stop coming to you first. You start learning about their life from the pieces they drop. A comment, a sigh, a half-hearted smile. Still, I tried my best. A widowed father trying to stay useful, needed, loved. I kept the house warm. I kept a chair for her at the table. And every time she said she'd stop by, I'd tidy up the living room like company was coming. I suppose that's what loneliness does. You cling to the idea of someone before you look at the reality of who they've become. On the afternoon everything changed. I wasn't expecting her. She'd called earlier that week, sounding rushed like she always did lately. "Dad, I'll come by soon. Maybe this weekend we'll talk." "About what?" I'd asked. "Just things," she said, and hung up before I could ask more. I should have noticed then. The distance in her voice, the hesitation. I thought she was stressed with work, or bills, or the usual burdens of adult life. I didn't expect tension, certainly not betrayal. When she knocked that day, her voice sounded bright, almost rehearsed. "Dad? Open up. It's me." I remember smiling as I walked to the door. It had been a while since she came over without needing something. I thought maybe this was one of those rare visits where she just wanted to see me. She brought groceries, or what I thought were groceries. A neat paper bag folded carefully at the top. "Thought I'd cook for you today," she said warmly. And I believed her, because fathers believe their daughters, even when their daughters no longer believe in them. She moved around the kitchen like she used to when she was a teenager, confident, talkative, filling the room with her presence. I watched her with a quiet kind of pride. She was my little girl again for a moment, laughing at her own jokes, humming while cutting vegetables, asking where I kept the bowls even though she already knew. But every now and then, there was a flicker in her eyes, an uneasy glance, a pause that didn't feel natural. I told myself I was imagining it. Old men see ghosts in harmless shadows. Then she reached into the paper bag, and something changed. Her fingers closed around a small container, one she didn't hold up for me to see. She kept her back to me as she opened it, tilted her wrist at an odd angle, and that was the first time I felt something cold move through me. Not anger, not fear, just stillness, like the air itself was holding its breath. She stirred the soup gently, talking to me about nothing, traffic, a coworker, the weather. Her voice never changed, but her shoulders were tense, too tense. I didn't say anything, didn't ask, didn't confront. I simply watched her reflection in the polished metal ladle as she dipped it into the pot. A reflection doesn't lie. It shows you what people try to hide when they think they're turned away. I saw the motion clearly. I saw the small pinch of powder fall. I saw the quick shake of her hand as if brushing away guilt. And for the first time in my life, I felt something inside me go quiet. Not broken, not shattered, just quiet. The silence felt heavier than any words I could have spoken. She turned around, smiling, carrying 2 bowls like everything was ordinary. "Here you go, Dad," she said sweetly. "Eat while it's hot." But the warmth in her voice didn't reach her eyes. I sat down slowly, stared at the bowl in front of me, and I thought about every moment I'd trusted her, every sacrifice, every bedtime story, every scraped knee I fixed with gentle hands. My daughter, my own flesh and blood. She didn't know I'd seen. She didn't know the truth sat between us, silent, heavy, unavoidable. I didn't touch the spoon, not yet, because the peace I'd always known, that quiet, steady peace that had carried me through years of grief, was about to end. Her timing was flawless. That's what unsettled me most. She set the bowls on the table with a smile that didn't quite fit her face, too tight at the edges, too quick to disappear. I watched her hands as she placed mine in front of me. Smooth, deliberate, almost careful. That's when I knew something was wrong. "Go on, Dad," she said softly. "You should eat before it cools." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes flicked, just for a moment, toward the bowl she meant for me. A small, sharp glance. Barely noticeable, unless you were looking for it. And I was. I reached for the spoon, but my fingers hovered above it instead of closing around the handle. The steam rose in thin curls, carrying the smell of vegetables and broth. Comforting. Familiar. But the moment didn't feel familiar. My daughter stood too still, too quiet. She used to talk non-stop when we shared meals. Stories, updates, complaints, anything that crossed her mind. Now she watched me with a silence that pressed against the walls of the room. "What's wrong?" she asked. But the concern wasn't real. It was rehearsed, placed exactly where it needed to be. I didn't answer. Instead, I leaned forward slightly. "Nothing," I said, keeping my voice soft. "Just thinking." She exhaled, a tiny sigh of relief, and sat down across from me. She took a bite from her bowl. A small bite, barely a taste. Her eyes never left me. I lifted my spoon, letting it hover above the surface, and that's when her phone buzzed on the counter. Her entire expression changed. She stood up quickly. "I'll be right back," she said, trying to sound casual. But her steps were too fast. She crossed the kitchen and snatched her phone before the second buzz. Her back was toward me, but her voice, hushed, urgent, gave everything away. "Yes, he's eating now," she whispered. "No, I didn't put much. I know. Just enough to calm him down. Stop worrying. He won't even know." I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink, just listened. Her words hit me with a force I didn't expect. Not because I thought she wanted to harm me, but because she believed I needed to be managed, controlled, handled like a burden she didn't want to carry. The woman speaking on that call wasn't the daughter I raised. When she turned around, she masked her expression too quickly. But the mask didn't sit right. "You okay?" she asked lightly. I nodded. A small, polite nod that told her nothing. But inside, something had shifted. She returned to the table and slid into her chair. Her shoulders were tense now. Her smile forced. "Dad, I've been thinking," she began. That tone. That careful, measured tone. "I really think it's time you considered a retirement place. Somewhere with help. Somewhere safe." I kept my spoon suspended over the bowl. "Safe?" I asked quietly. "Yes," she said quickly. "You're alone here. You forget things. You need someone looking after you." I didn't interrupt her, didn't defend myself, didn't remind her I'd lived alone just fine since Helen died. She continued, voice rising slightly. "There's a place near my home. I can take care of everything there. Bills, medication, finances. You won't have to worry about a thing." There it was. The word she shouldn't have said. Finances. She tried to cover it with a smile, but even she seemed to taste the mistake. "Dad, I'm just trying to help," she added quickly. I finally lowered the spoon, set it quietly onto the table. The small tap of metal against wood echoed louder than her entire speech. "I know," I replied softly. She brightened too quickly. "Good. Then you understand." "But I switched the bowls," I said. Her breath caught. She stared at me, waiting for me to laugh, to say I was joking. I didn't. "What?" she whispered. "I switched the bowls," I repeated, just as calmly. She looked down at her own bowl, realization hitting her like a cold wind. Her spoon clattered against the ceramic. "Dad, what did you put in mine?" I asked. There it was, the question she never prepared an answer for. Her lips trembled. Her hands shook. "Dad, please, it's not what you think. It's just something to relax you. To calm you before we talked." "To calm me," I echoed. "Before you told me to leave my own home?" She flinched. "There's no need to be dramatic," she muttered. I looked at her, not with anger, not with hate, just with a long, steady sadness she couldn't hide from. "You were going to feed me something without telling me," I said quietly. "You were going to take me somewhere I didn't choose, and you thought I wouldn't notice." She covered her face with her hands. "Dad, I didn't know how to talk to you. Everything is easier if you're calm." "But not honest," I replied. Silence fell. Not soft silence, heavy silence. The kind that fills every corner of a room until even breathing feels too loud. She lowered her hands slowly. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said gently, "and that's the problem." Her eyes met mine, wide, scared, searching. And in that moment, I felt something inside me settle into place. I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse her, didn't storm out, but something in me grew still, very still. And that stillness held a truth I could no longer ignore. I would not stay silent. The door closed behind her with the softest thud, not angry, not rushed, just final. A sound that barely touched the air, yet somehow echoed through me. I sat there long after she left. The house felt hollow, like someone had scooped out the middle of everything and left only the shell. The two bowls sat untouched on the table, steam fading into thin wisps before vanishing completely. It felt symbolic, in a way, something warm turning cold while I sat frozen. I didn't touch the spoon, didn't move the bowls, didn't clean the table. I just listened to the quiet. It's strange. You think betrayal will explode inside you, loud and sharp. You expect anger to roar through your chest. But mine didn't. What I felt was quieter, heavier. It settled low, like a stone sinking in still water. I pushed my bowl away and folded the napkin she'd placed beside it. A small, unnecessary action, but it steadied my hands. I kept replaying the moment in my mind. Not the powder, not the phone call, not even the switch. Just her face. The face of a woman who once clung to my leg at the grocery store because she was scared of getting lost in the aisles. The face of the little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest during thunderstorms. I closed my eyes and saw her at 9 years old, wearing an apron 3 sizes too big, standing on a chair so she could reach the counter. She'd made me a birthday cake that year, uneven layers, icing running down the sides, sprinkles everywhere. When I took a bite, it tasted awful. But she watched me with such hope, and I told her it was perfect. She threw her arms around me so hard I couldn't breathe. How does that child become the woman who whispers into a phone about just enough to calm him down? I stood slowly, my knees cracking in protest, and walked to the sink. I turned on the tap and let the warm water run over my hands. It grounded me, kept me from spiraling into thoughts with no bottom. For a moment, I imagined Helen standing behind me, drying her hands with a towel, giving me that look she used to, the one that said, "You'll handle this, you always do." But the kitchen was empty, and her memory was the only warmth in the room. I dried my hands and walked into the living room. Every step felt deliberate, like I was learning how to walk again. Helen's photograph sat on the mantel, still smiling, still patient. I rested my fingers on the frame. "I don't know how to fix this," I whispered. The grief in my voice surprised me. It came from a deeper place than anger ever could. A place where disappointment meets heartbreak. I lowered myself into my old armchair, the one with my shape worn into it. The leather felt cold against my back. The television across the room reflected my face back at me. I didn't recognize the man staring. He looked tired. Older than he should. As if the last hour had carved new lines along his cheeks. "Where did I go wrong?" I murmured to the empty room. But the room didn't answer, it only offered its silence. And silence can be merciless. A gust of wind rattled the window. The sound jolted me, reminded me I wasn't dreaming. This wasn't some story I could wake from. This was real. I shifted the blanket across my lap. Not because I was cold, but because I suddenly felt fragile, small. Being widowed brings one kind of loneliness. Being betrayed by your own child, that's a different kind of loneliness entirely. As evening settled in, shadows stretched across the room, long and slow. I didn't turn on the lights. Darkness felt honest. It didn't pretend. I sat there, letting the weight of everything press against me, letting the truth settle the way dust settles after a collapse. At some point, I whispered her name, not in anger, not in accusation, just in pure disbelief. Marissa. The syllables felt foreign in my mouth, like I was speaking the name of someone I used to know. Hours passed, maybe more. Time changes shape when your heart is rearranging itself. Pain slowly softened, not because it faded, but because it found a place to sit. Somewhere deep, somewhere quiet. And in that quiet, a small thought began to grow, the kind that doesn't arrive with thunder, but with a whisper. A thought that didn't come from rage, didn't come from revenge. It came from truth. I sat up, wiped my eyes with the sleeve of my sweater, straightened my back. Then I looked at Helen's picture again. Her smile seemed steady, reassuring. "You'd tell me to be strong," I whispered, "and careful." I nodded, as if she were sitting right there. "I will be." I stood and walked down the hallway, not quickly, not dramatically, just steady. Each step felt deliberate, full of purpose I hadn't felt in years. And as I reached for the light switch, the words formed softly, clearly, without hesitation. I began to think, very carefully. I didn't sleep that night, not a minute. I lay in the dark listening to the bones of the house, the old beams shifting with the cold, the faint hum of the heater, the wind slipping through the window frame like a tired sigh. But inside me, there was a different kind of quiet. Not confusion, not panic, not even heartbreak anymore. A purposeful quiet. The kind that rises when your mind stops trying to understand what happened and begins deciding what comes next. Near dawn, when the sky was still half asleep, I reached for the small wooden box in my nightstand. It held all the things I didn't expect to need again: password lists, account summaries, emergency contacts, copies of old documents Helen insisted we save. My hands didn't shake. They moved slowly, deliberately. You learn as you age that rushing solves nothing. I set the box beside me. Then I pulled out my old leather-bound notebook, the one Helen gave me the year she got sick. She said I needed a safe place to keep my thoughts before grief made them slippery. The last few pages were still blank, waiting. I opened to a clean page and wrote 3 words. Trust has limits. Not a warning, not a threat, a truth. Then I began to plan, not out of anger, but out of understanding. I turned on my phone and opened my banking app. The blue glow lit up my face, revealing a man who suddenly felt very awake. I went through every setting slowly, removed shared bill access, revoked linked devices, changed passwords to ones only I knew, shifted 2-factor authentication to my landline, the phone Marissa never bothered to learn. I confirmed each change with a firm tap. Every confirmation sound felt like closing a door I should have locked long ago. When the last update went through, I exhaled quietly. Not in relief, in clarity. Next, I retrieved the deed to the house, still in my name, still legally untouched. I made 3 copies, one for the safe, one for my lawyer, one tucked behind Helen's favorite photograph, the one place no one would search without love guiding them. Then I changed the code on the safe. Not to something clever, to something mine. A memory only I carried, a code no one else on earth could guess. Revenge doesn't begin with emotion. It begins with documentation. I wrote down every detail from that night. The time she arrived, her tone, the shift in her eyes, the powder, the ladle, the phone call, the phrase, "he won't even know the difference." I didn't exaggerate, didn't dramatize, didn't guess. I wrote what happened. Truth stands stronger when you don't dress it up. I dated the page, slipped Helen's embroidered bookmark over it, and closed the notebook. The bowls were still on the table the next morning, cold now, but untouched, like witnesses waiting to speak. I gathered what mattered, the spoon she'd stirred with, the ladle that revealed the reflection, the bowl she wanted me to eat from. Each item went into clean bags. I labeled the bags with the date and time. Then I placed all of them into the safe. Not because I wanted police involved. Not because I wanted to punish her. but because a father deserves to protect himself from the next betrayal he never expected. And evidence is protection. Quiet protection. At sunrise, when the sky turned the soft color of pale peach, I dialed a number I hadn't used in too long. Gerald Stone, my attorney, my old friend, the kind of man who listens with both ears and answers only when he's sure of the truth. He answered on the second ring. "Elliot, you all right?" "No," I said, "but I will be." And I told him everything, every detail, every hesitation, every moment I wished wasn't real. He didn't interrupt, not once. When I finished, he exhaled into the phone, long, slow, thoughtful. "Elliot," she crossed a line you can't ignore. "I know. We'll take steps to protect you. Carefully. Quietly." "What do I need to do?" I asked. "For now, nothing," he said. "Let me handle the groundwork. And Elliot, yes? Don't confront her alone again. Let truth work for you, not emotion." I closed my eyes and nodded. Emotion had guided 30 years of fatherhood, but it would not guide this. I returned to the kitchen. Morning sun spilled across the table, touching the bowls with soft, indifferent light. I rested my palm on the table where her small fingers once tapped when she was excited about school. The memory hurt in a quiet, steady way. Then I opened my notebook again and wrote my last line for the day. The stage is set. All I have to do is wait. Not for revenge, not for her apology, not for her collapse, but for truth to unfold on its own. Sometimes silence is the most powerful step in a plan. And I had become very, very good at silence. The day everything unfolded didn't feel dramatic. There were no dark clouds, no warning signs, just a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind that arrives with slow light and the soft scrape of a chair as you settle into the day. I was peeling an orange at the kitchen table, one long spiral, the way Helen used to show me, when I heard the crunch of tires outside. Marissa's car. She hadn't called, hadn't texted, but I knew she'd come eventually. Guilt always circles back to the place it was born. I didn't move right away. I finished peeling the orange, letting the scent calm me, letting the moment anchor me. Then came the knock, 3 taps, soft, hesitant. "Dad?" "It's me." Her voice carried an uncertainty I hadn't heard in years. I opened the door just enough to see her face. She looked tired in a way makeup couldn't hide. Not exhausted, just shaken. The face of someone carrying a secret that has finally become too heavy. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside and nodded. She walked in slowly, scanning the room the way a stranger scans unfamiliar territory. When her eyes landed on the kitchen table, the bowls still there, exactly where she left them, her breath caught. "You didn't clean up?" "I wasn't in the mood," I said simply. She swallowed, a small, visible flex of her throat. "Dad, about the other night." She forced a smile that collapsed before it fully formed. "I think you misunderstood what you saw." I didn't speak. I didn't rescue her from the silence. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. "It wasn't anything bad. It's a supplement, just a natural relaxant. I thought it might help you sleep better. You've been so tense lately." Her voice cracked on the last word. Not from sorrow, from fear. I walked to the mantel, opened the drawer beneath it, and took out a folder. Thick, organized, prepared. I laid it gently on the coffee table. She stared at it. What is that?" "Everything," I said quietly. Inside were photographs Gerald had taken of the utensils and bowls. A clean summary of my notes. Duplicates of the deed. Records of the banking changes. The timeline. The labels. The truth. She didn't reach for it, but her body shifted back as if the folder itself had weight. "Dad, why would you do this?" Her voice trembled, a mixture of confusion and fear. "I had to protect myself," I said calmly. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. "You switched the bowls," she whispered. I nodded. I switched the bowls, her face drained of color. All pretense fell away. "Dad, I didn't mean—" "You meant to calm me," I said softly. "But not inform me, not ask me, not speak to me honestly." She hid her face in her hands. "I just didn't know how to talk to you," she whispered. "I didn't want to fight. I thought if you were relaxed, maybe you'd listen." I let her speak. Let the truth sit between us like a third person in the room. After a long pause, she lifted her head. "What happens now?" she asked. I opened the folder again and slid a single sheet toward her, a letter already signed and notarized. She stared at it. Dad, what is this? A boundary, I answered. Effective immediately, you no longer have access to my accounts, my home decisions, or my medical information. Her breath hitched. You're cutting me off. No. I kept my voice steady. I'm protecting what's left of us. She looked confused through her tears. I don't understand. You will, I said softly. Over time. She pressed her fingers to her lips, shaking her head. Dad, I wasn't trying to hurt you. I met her eyes. Hurt isn't always intentional, Marissa. But trust breaks the same way whether you mean to or not. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. Are you sending me away? No, I said. You're choosing to leave when you act without honesty. I'm just choosing not to follow. She covered her mouth to muffle a sob. I stood. I'm going to step outside for a minute. You can gather yourself and go when you're ready. She nodded without looking up. I reached the doorway, then paused. Marissa. She glanced toward me, mascara smudged, eyes red. This house will always remember the little girl who made that terrible birthday cake for me. But it won't forget what happened here. She shut her eyes tightly, as though the memory itself stung. I stepped outside. Cold air wrapped around me like a long exhale. I listened to the wind moving through the pines, gentle and unbothered. Behind me, I heard soft footsteps, a door opening, a pause, a broken breath. She walked past me to her car. Didn't look back. As her engine faded down the road, something inside me loosened, slowly, quietly, like a knot finally giving way. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt free. And in that fading silence, with the sun rising behind the trees, I breathed out the truth I'd been carrying. And in that silence, I finally felt free. The house is quiet again now, but it isn't the painful quiet it was before. It's softer. Still, a kind of quiet that settles into the walls only after the truth has been faced and survived. I sat at the same kitchen table this morning, watching sunlight crawl across the wood grain. The same place where everything changed. The same place where trust broke and where clarity finally took its place. The bowls are gone. The utensils, the evidence, stored safely away. Not to hold over her head, but to remind myself of the line that was crossed and the strength it took to acknowledge it. A father remembers things differently than other people. He remembers small hands wrapped around his finger. He remembers school recitals, bedtime stories, scraped knees, and whispered secrets shared in the dark. And he remembers the moment those memories stopped matching the person standing in front of him. I think about that night often, the moment my daughter thought I didn't see her putting a strange substance into my soup. The moment I switched the plates, not to punish her, not to frighten her, but to see, clearly, quietly, without illusions, who she had become. People like to say the truth hurts, but I learned something else. The truth frees you. You cannot choose how your children grow. You cannot control the shadows that attach themselves to their fears, their pride, their choices. You cannot hold on to the version of them you keep in your heart, but you can choose your own peace. You can choose when to set the boundary you should have set long ago. You can choose when to step out of the storm instead of waiting for it to pass. You can choose dignity even when it comes at a cost. Forgiveness will take time. I am old enough to accept that. Forgiveness isn't a sudden release. It's a long road walked slowly, one breath at a time. But peace can begin the moment you stop hoping someone will be who they used to be and start accepting who they are now. This morning, for the first time in months, I drank my tea without a tremor in my hands. I slept through the night without waking to the ache of what-ifs. I felt something settle deep inside me. Not victory, not pride, just peace. Maybe respect, once lost, can be reclaimed if you wait for the right moment. And maybe that moment isn't loud or dramatic. Maybe it's simply the sound of your own heart finally resting. If this story stayed with you, tell me what you would have done in my place. And if you'd like to hear more quiet truths from an old heart, feel free to subscribe.